Okay, well, hello everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of Ed Talks, a property podcast. As I think you know, I always try and bring you people who have an interesting take on property. They have an interest in an area which I know our listeners will be interested to find out more about. And we've had some very interesting people on, and actually sometimes it's very difficult to find these people. You hear about them. But actually, this particular guy I've been giving some advice to recently, and I've been absolutely fascinated with what he's been doing. It's a guy called Paul Conway, and he has a company called HMO Services London, which sort of does what it says on the tin. So welcome along, Paul.
Thanks, Ed.
So from what I've learnt about you, you have experience in property. So tell us a little bit about your background, because sitting here in front of you, there's barely a grey hair on your head, yet you seem to have done a huge amount of stuff.
I found one in my eyebrow the other day, Ed, so I had to cut that one out.
So tell me a bit about your past.
For me, it was oil industry background, so onshore and offshore oil rigs. So that was something called a fiscal metering specialist. So it's kind of coming from a kind of compliance and technical background. Fell into property on the side, bought property, renovated it ourselves, let it out, moved to London, property development in Chelsea. Then we had Caledonia, which was like a southwest London kind of social living concept. So working on the rent-to-rent model, but a kind of higher level. So you would have your toilet roll, your kitchen roll, your gardener, your cleaner, all these things in good social spaces. So it's kind of branded as this kind of new co-living fad that everybody's. So
you aimed for the top, Aberdeen and then Chelsea. There was no messing around.
I was originally Falkirk, so like there's Aberdeen's a lot further.
Okay.
It's further north and a lot higher in very much respect. So yeah, Falkirk's a lovely place. You should definitely go visit.
Okay. So, obviously the space you're in is a compliance space. Sounds like that's what you were in to start with. When did you start? So this era when you were doing a bit of property on the side, what was that? I'm assuming, given how young you are, that was presumably the 90s and noughties, was it?
Yeah, the noughties. So I was 18 when I bought my first place. I had 3 jobs. I was working in the oil industry, and then I was working as a DJ. Actually, not a very cool one, but yeah, a DJ and worked in a bar.
Well, no, it's one thing that definitely comes across with you is your work ethic. So I know from when I was an agent that HMOs were a bit of a dirty word, really. People didn't like dealing with HMOs. They felt that, oh God, there's a lot of planning issues. The kind of people that lived in them weren't necessarily the sort of people you wanted to necessarily have to manage. There was a lot of churn and turnover. So what was it that attracted you to that side of the business? I mean, as I say, the HMO services, the clue is in the name. So what was it that led you into that side of the business?
It kind of fell out from Caledonia. So obviously kind of going through the journey that we did with Caledonia to get properties up to a really good standard for a great co-living experience was the journey we had to go. And we had loads of regulation to go through that. And because from an oil industry background, it was kind of easy for us, but we knew it was kind of really technical and difficult. And there seemed to be a lot of pitfalls that you could fall through. So then we decided to create HMO Services London, which became a kind of end-to-end kind of property licence and compliance journey, including renovation, project management, and all these things that we do within HMO Services.
So what is it? I mean, I'm assuming that up until then it was mostly estate agents that had tried to keep up with that sort of compliance and legal requirement.
I think they tried, yeah, but I think as you well know, the last couple of years has been where they've realised they kind of have to. I mean, the property industry is changing, it's professionalising, the regulatory framework's changing every single day, licensing changes on average every 9.1 days, heaps of fines, etc. that are going around, and yeah, agents know that they need to be on top of this.
Yes, because it's interesting, because a lot of people in the industry think that the government changes that were altering the allowances and the amount of mortgage interest relief that could be put against rental properties was just about the money and all of that, but actually and trying to stop people being landlords. But you're quite right, you just used the word there, they wanted to professionalise the industry, and of course that suddenly happened very, very quickly, and I think a lot of people have got caught out. So what is it that you think enables you to do that better than somebody else? What is your sort of model? Do you have an office with 30 experts sitting in it? How do you connect people who want help to the people that can provide the help? Or is that all in your head? How does it work?
So I think going into slightly, I mean, people would refer to me, or I do a bit of content for Raj at Fixflow, and basically they call me the property licensing or HMO expert and all these things. And it's that part that kind of really stuck to us a couple of years ago. It's like, what really is an expert? It's somebody that's qualified, experienced and accredited to give you advice or provide you a service. So we kind of dug into that and we fell into the kind of fire safety side of things. It's like, who installs a fire door? Oh, well, my builder can do it, he's competent, etc., etc. And we went into, we tried to look into it and we're like, okay, it's BM, Tradar, QMark, FireAsk, qualified, accredited people that can actually install that and certify it. And that's what keeps you out of trouble at the end of the day when all things go wrong.
It's like a foreign language, isn't it? I mean, my experience of most estate agents, not necessarily lettings agents, I have to say lettings agents tend to have an eye for a little bit more detail, but estate agents in general aren't particularly detailed people.
Yeah.
So I remember at Douglas and Gordon, we had a fantastic property management department, lettings management department. Still do, actually. Not in the past. And actually, I think you do some work with them, don't you? So,
I've worked with them for years. We worked through when we're doing developments, and we've been supporting D&G for about 2.5, 3 years on licensing as well.
So that's become part of what you do. In other words, which other names in London have you worked with?
We're working with Hamptons just now, been with them for 8 months, KFH, Aspire, Winkworth, D&G, M&P. So it really has, it's spread out, you've sort of proved the model, so to say. Yeah.
Because a lot of these people are people who have their own, obviously their own property management sides, but the difference these days is that often a lot of estate agents require such a lot of legal advice, and I think you alluded to it earlier. You said heaps of fines, very Scottish expression there, heaps of fines, which is a lovely expression. But people are now, you read on Property Industry Eye, Estate Agent Today, you're reading every other week about some estate agent getting 10, 50, 6-figure fines.
Yeah, and that's kind of comes down as like who you taking your information from. And you asked earlier on about who's within our company. Yeah, we've got quite a small team within the kind of core of the company, but we've got experts that work for us from anywhere. We've got experts that are, if it's licensing you're looking at, they're qualified, experienced in local councils and accredited by the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health. We've got planning experts, RTPI planners, architects, ARB architects. We've got fire risk assessors as well. We're basically, that's how we can serve so many people.
And these are people not employed by you. They're people who are happy to then work for you.
That's right.
It's like it's almost like a professional gig economy.
Yeah, exactly.
Really.
So kind of property expertise on demand, and we're actually going to be changing our name shortly to kind of reflect our new model. That's what it is. We want to make sure that whoever it is, we're not trying to find the person who's closest to our office. We're trying to find the best people and the people that are actually qualified and experienced and accredited to give you advice. So that's kind of like what obviously my passion is to get that across. A lot of people think it's passion for licensing, a passion for this, and I support all this. It doesn't really matter to me. I just care about trying to get people the right advice.
No, sure. And my experience from talking to you in the past is not getting you to talk, it's getting you to stop talking about it because you're so passionate about it. So let's try and keep this to about half an hour. No, I think what I was alluding to earlier was the fact that a lot of estate agents who have big property management and letting sides, they want to try and, they have to stay compliant and they have to stay up to date, but with they have a number of choices, don't they? They can either spend a lot of time sending their staff off on training courses, which are being updated all the time, or they can just outsource it. I mean, it's that simple, really, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we do training for our partners, and our main thing is to get them to understand enough to get to a point that they know there's a problem. And that's where their staff need to stop, basically. It's like, we know there's a problem, let's get somebody in that actually knows how to... And obviously you're getting rid of the risk at the same time. But that's where most kind of fines and things are happening. It's just because the agent didn't know, it got dropped somewhere, there was a conversation with the PM or the or branch manager speaking with the landlord, this happened, that happened. It all just seems to be a little bit of advice, a little bit of bad knowledge somewhere, a little bit of how we didn't really know it was 3 people, what was 2 houses, we weren't quite sure. All these kind of little things that are kind of falling around, just getting dropping. That's where you find the drop-offs around.
Absolutely.
There. That initial bit of advice.
And the trouble is, as with everything to do with estate agency, it's the messenger that tends to get shot in this. It's the agent who's trying to keep up by giving advice.
Yeah.
So what is your preferred model? Does most of your effort go into the B2B market, into agents, or do you have individual landlords? I mean, the B2C market is growing all the time. The number of landlords and investors trying to do their own thing. Mm-hmm. Is that a part of the market that you're going after, or are you just going after B2B?
Yeah, at the moment in time, we have partnerships with our agents to speak to their landlords. We do some B2B selling as well with agents. We've got different ways that we run the model. But yeah, so basically we have a whole heap of kind of different kinds of clients, so different kinds of landlords. You've got landlords that are far overseas and don't really understand things, and don't want to understand it. You've got agents that represent these clients. We've got investors that want to add more value to property. There's a lot of different things, but the core of what we're doing is, I'm going to make sure that you have the right advice. That's all I need to do. Whatever the problem is, you can put it in any way whatsoever. Whether you want to increase return on investment, you just don't want to go through a license, but you have to. You're unsure about just a simple compliance check on your property. There's so many things that, from an investor level right the way down to a landlord that just wants a hands-off experience.
So the kind of stuff you're talking about is everything from fire doors, fire alarms, fire smoke detectors. Yeah. Give me one or two more examples of the sort of thing people need to look out for in there.
So physical things within the property. So basically if you're looking at risk within a property, I'll stop talking in about 20 seconds, don't worry. It all kind of comes from HSSRS, so which looks at like what's the likelihood of something going to happen, and if it did happen, what would be the outcome. So there's a kind of metric you use for that. And so you'll be surprised, but the highest risks are slips and trips. So like you don't have a handrail on a stairwell, the carpet's frayed at the top and you're going to fall down. All these people falling down a window. So there's lots of different things that you can
good standard sort of HSE stuff, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And you said quite rightly about landlords being B2C, and I know they kind of act like that, but they are businesses at the end of the day, and they have that responsibility, the same as what the agent does.
It's the professionalising.
That's what it comes down to. You've got two businesses making money from an asset. That's what's going on.
So it is part of your business. I mean, you say it's end to end. So part of what you do is trying to help someone identify whether they need a license. Is it only HMOs, or does this include normal rented property?
Yeah, it includes everything. So I mean, as I said, we're the advice part. We're making sure we did make HMO Services a kind of end-to-end model where we kind of project manages everything. We got your certificates and all these things as well. But obviously, with working with property managers, they had a lot of that kind of thing in a house already.
They had that covered. Yeah.
So we covered the advice, the start of the journey, the design, the fire kind of advice, fire risk assessments if required, licensing, and the planning as well. So the bits that they're kind of missing, that's the bits that they're missing. We did also project manage works now, but we support our partners or support our agents and support our landlords and say, look, this is who you need to use, this is why you need to use them, and you can use the guys we've used if you want. Like, we'll pass you on their details, like, these guys, or we'll tell you the exact accreditation to use, when to do it and why to do it. We'll monitor the compliance of your property at the same time.
Okay. Well, it sounds to me like a bit of a no-brainer, but just to come back to that question, it's not only HMOs. It can be standard rentals. So this goes far beyond the old-fashioned HMO.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, the easiest way to think about a HMO, there's 254 and 257 HMOs, but the simple 254 HMO is like you could have two sisters and a friend living together in a beautiful 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom flat in Fulham, and it's a HMO, all in one tenancy. And so that
does that depend on which council they're a part of, which borough they're in? That's a universal.
Yeah, that's just. Okay. So you basically define how it's been lived in. So is it a HMO or not? And then you have to look at the local licensing requirements, and then you have to look at the local planning requirements as well. So it's a 3-step process, and they're all individual from each other. Yeah. So you can have family homes that need licensing, or you need extra things. Say, for example, you had a landlord that moved in somebody with special needs, or they had mobility issues, or they were deaf or something like that, and they couldn't hear the smoke alarm going off. No matter where you are, you need to take account of that. As an agent and as a landlord, you need to take account that we're running the business and making money from this.
So is there a resource somewhere that people can go to find out whether they need a license? I mean, how do they find out? I mean, is there somewhere they can go? Is there a website they can go to and type in what they've got and say, God, I really do need a license?
The problem is that, varying councils have different systems, some more up to date than others, some that don't reflect their licensing schemes, some that do, which is a bit of a problem.
So how many schemes are there?
Well, there's 300 odd councils in the UK,
and they've probably all got something a bit different.
Yeah, there's so many different variations of it. I mean, you have 3 levels: mandatory, which is kind of England and Wales wide, but Wales is slightly different from England. It's the old method, which was had to be over 3 floors. Then you've got additional and selective, which is council specific. It could be ward specific, could be street specific. You could be a HMO, but it has to be over 2 floors of over.
So the best thing to do is to go to HMO Services London and ask someone. Isn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, you're peddling that for me there, Ed. But, definitely, I mean, we can help, and we're happy to have a chat and kind of help you identify it. If we can help you behind that, that's fine.
I mean, the thing is, there are so many things these days which agents have always done traditionally and have always known what they've been doing because it's been the same for donkey's years. Mm-hmm. And then so many things have changed recently, and there have been so many tech businesses popping up to try and help people.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason we started talking originally was that what I do is not dissimilar to what you do in terms of Vuber.
Yep.
Trying to fill in a gap in a service for people that need it, and finding a sensible way to deliver that. And actually, it's been very pleasing. I had a guy called Ian White in here about a couple of months ago. And Ian has the most amazing work ethic, but one of the things he's done is to set up an outfit which actually my business and your business are a member of, which is this thing called the Innovation Collaboration Group, which is a place, it's increasingly a place where agents can go and get a one-stop shop view of everything they might need, and any of the holes they've got in their business, they can pick a little bit out of it. Yeah. So that's something that you're a part of. Mm. Now, obviously, it's a national organisation, and the clue in your business, obviously, has been the HMO Services London, and quite rightly, I guess, you had to start off somewhere. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned earlier that you were thinking of changing the name, and why would you do that? I mean, obviously, I presume you want to expand the remit of the business, put it outside London, do it nationally. So talk to me a bit about your plans for that within what you're doing.
Yeah, so to touch on the ICG, we are a member, and it's been really good for us. And as you said, Ian's great as well. And what I found was that you don't actually know some of the problems you have until you go to the ICG and you see all these companies solving a lot of problems. But they seem to be picking companies that actually do solve real problems, not, as you say, with
nice to have.
Yeah, not nice to have. Yeah, it seems Ian's pretty good at that, basically. And I found companies in there that I didn't know I had a problem, and they're all solving it. So I'm like, that's good as well. And from kind of our perspective, why we're changing from we're HMO Services London. We now kind of call ourselves HMO Services because obviously we started going out to the home counties. We're in Birmingham, we're in Nottingham, we're in various kind of cities out the UK already. We've got UK-wide partners that allow us to expand out really quickly. So that's kind of what we're doing. We are changing brands. Our new brand is called You'll hear a lot about it shortly. In the new year, we'll be launching.
And that's spelt
YUNO.
Okay, and where did that come from?
It kind of came back to the core kind of value and ethos of what it is. Yunona in Japanese is competent. It's okay, I checked out with a Japanese person that it is, not just Google. So that's where it came from. And then we came up with like highly competent, and then it became Hi Yuno, so we're hiyuno.com. It's just a kind of splash page at the moment in time, but it gives you an idea. So that's where we came up with Yuno. That's how Yuno was born. And it's property expertise, or accredited property expertise on demand. That's what it's about. We'll make sure that the person that you're speaking to is accredited, qualified and experienced to give you that advice. Okay,
so what you're trying to do is to connect anybody anywhere, and what you will be able to do at the moment, it's very much been, as you say, London home counties and specific places, but obviously a bit further down the line, anyone in the UK who thinks, I've checked up, I think I need a licence, you can go to you, get a suite of stuff which will help them become compliant, basically. It's a straightforward answer.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that sounds pretty straightforward, really. I mean, as I said, in the old days, HMOs had a bit of a dirty name. Of course, these days, not just rentals, but actually HMOs specifically were always seen as high yielding, but quite a lot of trouble in terms of, as I say, these planning issues. I mean, certainly in the old days, he says, sounding like an old fart, in the old days, if you had an HMO licence on a property, you couldn't then put it back into normal residential. You had to just stick with it. You could find another place in the same borough to change the use and then convert that property. But HMOs have always been, even now, they're still a source of better yield. So people do chase them, and particularly, of course, with the uptick in rental prices having gone up in conurbations, people quite like the idea of living in a room with shared facilities.
Yeah.
Are you finding that HMOs are on the rise? Are they on the wane? I mean, are they still very much a part of a lot of people's portfolios? What's your view of HMOs? Are they coming, going, here to stay?
I think they are.
Here to stay?
Yeah, I think they are, yeah. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, right now what's happened, there is an increase in obviously interest in them, and because of the regulation, people are having increased costs anyway, so they'll maybe look at trying to get those costs back by maybe changing the way they run their model, the way they run their business. But I guess for a kind of landlord or agent's perspective, the market is changing from the old way HMOs are to the new kind of co-living, and I think that even although some people have said maybe there's going to be too many HMOs or too many people within the areas, etc., but I think it's just going to increase the quality. I think it's going to increase the professionalisation.
Okay, so you would actually, within that sentence you just said there's a bit of a clue. In other words, you call it co-living.
Yeah.
That's the sort of, is that the sort of modern, I don't think I've heard that before, that's the sort of modern way of describing it, is it?
Yeah,
co-living?
yeah, and people have a lot of conversations about this sort of thing. HMO, shared living, co-living, there's a lot of different things, and co-living is the
Some sound better than others.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's originally how it started, but there seems to be a conversation around shared living and co-living and what's the difference and what's the difference.
But you mentioned that some people are altering their business models to suit. So how would that manifest itself? Let's say that you currently have a 3-bedroom house, with a couple of people in it, renting it. Are you implying that with the HMO rules, if you get it right, you can increase the yield from that property by changing it somehow so that it becomes an HMO? Is that...
Yeah, so basically, as we kind of pointed out before, is that like it's I think that's why also people need to start using something that's a little bit more like co-living, because like a HMO, you have two sisters living together, their friend moves in, it's a HMO. So that's kind of like that's just fact. That's from the Housing Act. So like if you're trying to increase your yield on your property, then you can look at the kind of layout of the property. Obviously, the co-living model is making sure that there's great shared space, make sure that they have a way to interact. There's apps being built. There's loads of cool things happening in the co-living space. But just simply, if you're in an area that's heavily regulated, heavily licensed, heavily planning, but lots of planning in Article 4, etc., then your property as a HMO is worth more on rental income than it is.
So give me an example. So you might have a 3-bedroom house that's renting at 600, and as an HMO it would be 800 a month or something. I mean, can the differences be that substantial?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so basically, if you haven't got the right regulatory certificates in place, like licensing or planning or etc., then your property could only say have 2 people in it, and they're going to pay £1,600 a month, depends where you are. And then basically, if you can get the third person, and you've got 3 people sharing that kind of, and we're just talking about a shared tenancy, we're not talking about individual tenancy agreements. We're talking about 3 people that say, okay, the budget's up, they've got £700 each to spend. Maybe you're going to get 2 or 3 out of that flat, and the flat next to you doesn't have the license and doesn't have all these things that it's been through, and they're going to rent out to 2. So you're getting 2 or 3, and they're getting 1,600.
And do you think there's quite a large market out there of people who are doing that anyway? What are their chances of getting caught?
Oh yeah, the councils are getting hot. So, yeah, they are. Yeah, and there's a lot of kind of data enforcement as well. So councils are getting a lot smarter with how they're sharing data between each councils, and there's a lot of good stuff that's happening.
Yeah, no, I haven't. Traditionally, obviously, these councils probably haven't been very good at sharing with each other. You would have thought.
Oh, some of them don't even talk within the councils still. Like the licensing won't speak to planning. So you're supposed to go through planning permission and find out if you can run a HMO in your area, and then go through the licensing and yada yada yada.
Okay, so actually, rather than looking at what you do as being something which solves a problem for people who have the problem and may not want it. Mm-hmm. What you're actually saying here is that for some people it makes sense to actually spend the money getting the licensing and turning their building, their property into an HMO to increase the yields. I mean, there's actually a business case here.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
But it's property specific, though. Each one needs to analyse in its own
I get
merit.
that. But answer this for me, Paul. If I mentioned that situation in the old days where if you had an HMO licence, if you had an HMO on a building, you couldn't then change it back to residential.
Yeah.
Is that still the case?
Not really, no. So basically, that's only applicable when you fall into planning and you go to 7 or more tenants. If you go to 7 or more tenants, then most...
7 or more?
7 or more.
Oh, wow, okay.
You're most likely going to have to go into sui generis classification.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, so between 3 and 6 people, you're going from C3 to C4 use. So a C4 is a small HMO.
So for most people, that's not going to be an issue.
It's not going to be an issue, no.
Okay.
And you can, if you get a licence, you just phone them up or email them and say, I've not got the tenants living there anymore, can I cancel my licence? It's that easy.
And how long does a licence last for when it's given?
Typically 5 years, sometimes less depending on the length of the scheme, and they're unsure about
But
renewing.
you can cancel it before the 5 years if you want to.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so that issue that a lot of agents would have when they're advising their clients, where they're thinking, God, you don't want to get into that, particularly the older ones like me, who probably have an influence on some of their landlords.
Yeah.
They may be saying, well, no, you don't want to do that, because they've got that old-fashioned feel for HMOs.
Yeah.
They need to understand that the business case for HMOs now, provided you're not talking about a whole building with 6 or 7 or more people living in it, you can really pick and choose a little bit. And so long as you meet the compliance issues, the licensing issues, you're going to be making more money out of it for a bit of a one-off spend up front. You can then...
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah.
Okay, that's fascinating actually, because that puts what I think of what you guys do on a very different footing. Because as I said, I always thought it was a slightly reactive suggestion, idea that people should only do this when they think, oh crikey, I better go and sort that out, because I'm worried about it. Actually, this is a proactive proposition where people can actually go out and think, do you know what, rather than making my 1,200 quid a month, I could make 1,500 quid a month if I go and spend a couple of grand now, and then I get that money back within a year, and it starts being even more productive. So that's cool. I didn't know that. That's been really helpful. Okay, so I mean, obviously we mentioned the Innovation Collaboration Group. I think that's likely to... And I think they're in the process at the moment of launching, of building a website which is going to have everyone's propositions on it. So the agents will then have somewhere to go to see it all. From your point of view, where are you at with the conversion from HMO services to high? Are you raising money? Have you got the money? Investment? Give the listeners some idea of where it's at the moment.
Yeah, it's been really exciting. It is attracting a lot of interest at the moment in time. So we spent kind of the summer figuring out what actually was, and then we spent the next few months kind of creating our kind of financials and our pitch behind
This is based on 3 years of experience of running HMO Services
Exactly.
London.
So we figured out what we ran HMO Services for 2.5 years, coming up for 3 years now, and we figured out what works, what doesn't work, what's the value, what's expandable, what isn't expandable, where can we add the most value to our clients, and how can we do that on a national basis, and that's where was kind of born. And there is going to be, we need investment just now. We want to take it a lot faster than what we're currently doing, because we're already running the model, but the kind of tech element, as with building Viewber, there's a huge cost behind that.
Sure.
So we're building the kind of tech stack at the moment in time, and that's what we're looking for the investment for.
Okay. So anybody listening who fancies it, they should get in touch with Paul. We'll put the contact details up for people, and you can give the website details in a minute. Now, the lovely Heidi, who runs all our social media stuff, said, right, Ed, when you get to the end of your things, you've got to ask these people off-the-cuff questions. So I've got 3 off-the-cuff questions for you here, which I was going to ask you. For anybody else trying to do this, what's your top tip?
Trying to go through this, it's just ask somebody that actually knows, and as I said, it goes back to their accreditation. It's not who peddles himself as the property expert. It's not the person that's paid the most on PPC. It's not the person that's paid most on Google. It's the person that's qualified and experienced and accredited to give you advice. Okay,
that's perfectly sensible. If you could go back in time, what would you tell your younger self?
There's a lot there. I think most of it is just don't worry about it. Don't worry about anything.
So you a worrier?
I'm a bit of a worrier. Yeah.
That's very good advice, but unfortunately you can't change. I don't think the younger to the older changes. My experience as I get older, I get more worried. But anyway, maybe that'll change.
Everyone's going to be all right.
Maybe that'll change.
That's all you need to know. Everyone's going to be okay.
So, and thirdly and lastly, is there anyone or anything in the property industry that you really look up to or have been inspired by?
Apart from yourself, Ed.
Correct answer, but moving on from that.
Yeah, I mean, there's been loads of people that have helped me on the journey so far, and I think that Raj at Fixflow is exceptional. He actually just helped me out the other day as well, and his knowledge of the industry is just fantastic. Nick Lyons, No Letting Go as well. He's helped me out a lot, and solid advice. And there was a guy that used to be my mentor called Phil Laney. He's from a company called Lively. It's a VC-backed kind of social living, co-living, kind of social living, another word for it, concept. And yeah, these guys are fantastic.
Good. Okay. Well, I hope they're listening. And if not, you can send them the podcast. Okay. Well, listen, Paul, the website as it exists at the moment is
HMO Services London.com.
Okay, well, if anybody wants any advice, they can go there, and they can get in touch with you, obviously, through that website. So, Good. Okay, well, I think for a lot of us, we've talked about lettings, sales, tech, whatever else, and I think this has been very interesting and I'm sure it'll be interesting to a lot of people. So thanks, Paul, for coming in, and I hope the listeners enjoy it. Thank you.